Now let's dive into futures thinking. And futures thinking here is quite important. Older brother to the design thinking in a way. It's like a level up to the things. It's how do we design futures? And if you are a design leader, you always need to reflect what's there to come, where you shine the light basically, and then work backwards and inform every single smaller decision in the day-to-day scenarios. So some of the principle and core statements which you definitely need to familiarize and kind of be okay with working with the future thinking is that the future is definitely not predictable. A lot of people will tell you things and they pretend that they can predict things, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but ultimately nobody can predict the future, especially to do with social economics, sustainability, bigger issues, global scale services and knock-on effects and ripple effects. You can never predict what could happen tomorrow at the bigger picture. You can predict the small things, but never like in large. The future is definitely not predetermined. Following on from a previous point, like you can't, determine some things, but it's never kind of set in stone. Even if you read Isaac Asimov's Foundation series or some sort of sci-fi. There's a lot of truth in that, but it's definitely not a recipe for the future. We get inspired from it and it kind of anchors us, but it's definitely not there. And lastly, the future can be influenced by individual choices, meaning you. And that's why exactly I'm bringing this, because the future is pliable. One way to look at this is through the futures cone. And maybe you've seen this before, but it's a superb tool to kind of represent exactly what the futures thinking is like. Imagine a torchlight, and this is from Joseph Borrows. The futures cone is a known title for it, but the future is really that beam of light in the darkness, and you can direct that beam of light in different directions. Typically, when we kind of direct at something, we're very straight at it and we very definite of what we want to illuminate, and that's the probable future. There's obviously a plausible future. As the actual beam increases and it gets hazier, and more things illuminate, but not as vividly. You get the plausible and then the possible futures, and those possibilities basically is what you're trying to define. But the point of the actual illustration is that you as a design leader or a researcher, a designer, are able to direct that light at a certain effort. So it doesn't mean that you're shining it there today at that specific target. You can kind of shift the direction slightly between the plausible and possible futures and then define exactly what it should be. And the future is going to be very different than what you've shown today and what the today's state is like. So that's how you can use it as a mental model ultimately, because with the futures thinking, you're there to define the preferable future, and AI toolkit UX automation is no different. We basically today, if we would obsess, and every single design leader would just obsess with Figma automations and plugins, then our future, this is probable future, is going to be just that. We're just going to be having the most amazing Figma plugins. But because we have preferable choices of what else we need to automate, the future is going to be very different. And that's a basis and thesis for this video ultimately. In terms of how design thinking and futures thinking work together, again, futures thinking is a bigger brother of the design thinking. So for design thinking, you solve today's and kind of short to near future user needs, human needs. With the actual futures thinking, you're solving way ahead. But if you define the future, that preferable future or desirable future, you can then work backwards and inform what the design thinking should be now. And this is where those interventions going to come in a lot in hand as we define that roadmap. Again, research the futures thinking a bit more, but ultimately all of it is this. This should inform your activities. If you just want to go ahead and apply this into your day-to-day scenarios, you could just take the futures thinking model, and every ideation is going to start with the futures and only then with a design thinking. Or every decision you're going to make, you're going to kind of bounce between the futures and the design thinking, kind of zooming in and out, and then reflect exactly what's right to do. This is also one of the themes of the upcoming podcast with Samuel Huber, who is a planet-centric designer, and we cover a lot of that there. So stick around because there's going to be an episode coming shortly, but that's the primer for the futures. So what I want to share with you next is really this framework, which is, it's sourced of a lot of different elements, but it's basically, it informed a lot of those decisions and how, let's say, I helped product leaders and businesses create machine learning powered solutions.